All right. Hello and welcome to all of you. And nice that you're here for this Valentine's Day event. We're going to look at how we connect to each other. Everything about human design is not about partnership. As a matter of fact, it really is truly a secondary thing. Everything about the nature of human design is about the potential of the differentiated, unique being. This is what we're here for. This is what we're all about. At the very core, at the very nature of what we are as beings, lies the potential for us to fulfill whatever our uniqueness happens to be. And to be able to do that while living successfully on this plane. One of the things that you get to see immediately in the nature of being is that we are in these bioshells. And the life program is very specific. The life program says that, the only way in which we are going to survive is that we need to reproduce. And that everything about the way in which we are going to operate in the world is that we're going to be controlled by receptors. Think about your design. I mean, the graphic. And you look at the graphic and what do you see? You see things colored in. Every single one of those things that are colored in is the nature that is there in you. That is, it is the genetic predisposition to your potential uniqueness. But the majority of the things that are there are white. They're just white. White centers, white gates, white channels. They're not empty. They're not broken. They don't need to be fixed. They are graphic metaphors of receptors. Most of what we are is receptors. And what we are most receptive to, aside from the program itself, is the other. And because we have a biological imperative, an imperative that says that we must bond, that we must mate, that we must reproduce, and that this is something that is deeply embedded in the genetics of the species, that it is something that we, in most cases, helplessly deal with. The beauty of human design begins with something very simple. It is the surface of the knowledge. The surface of the knowledge says that you can operate correctly on this plane if you take the responsibility of making decisions away from your mind and you give it to your strategy and authority. That is, you give it to your vehicle. I mean, that's what your vehicle is for. It's an incredible intelligence that is here to operate on this plane and operate successfully. And it is not that we are here to ignore the receptors, because after all, this is what life is. This is how we connect to life. It's how we connect to being. It's how we connect to everything. One of the basic things that you learn in human design is that the very thing that conditions you at the start becomes your wisdom when you get to the other side of the process. Because after all, they are receptors. When you're looking at your design, all those things that are colored in, you can think of that as the student. And everything that's white is where you go to school. It's the things that you're here to learn in life. Most human beings, the vast majority of humanity, are just simply overwhelmed by where they go to school. They get lost there. Who they could be, might be, is all gone. Because it's so easy to get lost in the conditioning. What I want to share with you today is some basic formulas. They're just formulas. And something to understand about mechanics is why mechanics can liberate the spirit. Because you see, the moment that you see mechanics, there is that chance, that serendipity that for you in that moment, you can release yourself from the great curse of all bonds. And the great curse of all bonds is you have to be different. That other, if only they could be like this or they could be like that. If only you would change. If only you would pay more attention to me. If only we could do this or that. If only we could be like this or that. You see, the moment that you get into mechanics, you get into helplessness. Helplessness. And the only thing that protects you in terms of relationships in your life is not what the relationship is, but how you got there. Because if you don't get there correctly, you're always doing maintenance. Always. You see, the first thing to understand about mechanics is that when you get to see it, all you can do is go, oh, my goodness, well, all right, what am I going to do? Nothing. Because it's nobody's fault. It's not about blame. Relationships are built on these little dollops of blame that get stored away. These concepts about, the way somebody is supposed to be. Think about the way we work. We have stuff that's colored in, and we have things that are open. This whole nature-nurture process. But I want you to grasp something about conditioning, and something that's really, really important is that, you see, we're not simply the victims of conditioning. We put it out. We don't just take it in. We put it out. See, it's a fascinating thing when you can begin to recognize who you are and what you put out and what you are not and what you take in. Or in another way, what you put out that is always consistent and what you take in that is inconsistent. We are constantly in this tension. This is the Maya. It's the Maya. But it's not for getting swallowed in. It's not for getting fucked up in. It isn't. It's for navigating through. It's for the journey. It's for the extraordinary voyage of discovery. It's for this incredible cognitive experience to be self-reflected consciousness on this plane at this level. Wow, what a trip. And yet the majority of humanity is simply locked in ancient survival mechanisms and conditioned and conditioning. The homogenized pool of the planet and the way it functions, rising and falling on the program. Now I want you to think about that open center. And I want you to watch this flow of energy and understand something. When you put energy inside of somebody, it isn't the way you experience. It isn't. It's amplified. Amplified. So you've got an idea because you've got a fixed mind. You've got a fixed concept of one kind or another. And you're with this person and you're talking to them about this fixed concept, and you put this fixed concept in their head and they're open. And they don't just take it in. It becomes a big deal. It gets amplified. It becomes more, if you will. It gets elaborated on. It gets all kinds of stuff added to it. Think about it physically. Nearly 2/3 of humanity are generators. And on the other side, you have the three types. The projectors and manifestors and reflectors who do not have defined sacrals. And they are always taking in the sacral frequency, and they are always amplifying it. You want to see the most powerful generator? I mean, they don't live long, but you can see them. It's those not self-open beings amplifying all of that energy that's not theirs, that they cannot replenish, that they cannot stay healthy with. So it goes back and forth. Now, in human design, I guess the most extraordinary thing, because you really don't have to be, what do they say, a brain surgeon, a rocket scientist. It's two pictures, same graphic background. And in those two pictures, you get to see what happens when you bring them together. You know, in this case, what you're looking at here is that one of them represents, you can see, for example, this side over here, you can see it expressed in the green over here. And this over here, you can see expressed in the blue over here. So you've got the green and the blue forces here that come together and make something else. So I'm going to show you now 4 basic formulas. They're basic, but like all simple things, they carry a tremendous amount of truth. And of course, in terms of mechanics, you get to see what happens to you when you enter into a bond with somebody. Now think about it this way. You've got 2 ways in which that's going to work. You're going to enter into the bond as not self, which means you're going to be drawn by the conditioning, whatever the conditioning happens to be. And you can see that there's all kinds of conditioning, mutual conditioning that goes on in this relationship. The other side is you're going to enter into correctly this relationship. Now that's something totally different. It really is. Because you enter in as yourself. And as such, you're able to take in the other. I mean, it is something that is so important to understand about being yourself, and that you can make a decision that is correct for you in terms of who you bring into your aura. Most people don't. And so you end up in configurations when they're not correct that become deeply distorted. Now think about this image. This one down here. What you get to see in this image is that when these 2 beings come together, every single one of the centers, all of them, all of these centers, this is supposed to be colored in. I don't know why that, it's a mistake in the illustration. My apologies. Let's color this in. It's supposed to be colored in. Okay. So what happens when you bring the 2 together, what happens is that all 9 centers get colored in. So if you take your design and you put it together with somebody else's design and all the 9 centers get colored in, this is called 9 and 0. And as you can see, there's nowhere to go. Now think about how uncomfortable that can be. And think about how wonderful that can be. I mean, after all, it is about this and that, isn't it? But it's a 9 and 0. It means that when the 2 of you are together, nobody else can get in. Nobody else can get in. Not only that, when the 2 of you are together, it's hard to get away. You get locked in to each other. And you get locked into each other in a way that can be, well, healthy or not. It depends on the level of awareness in the relationship. But there isn't anything you can do about that. A 9 and 0 is a 9 and 0. You end up in a 9 and 0 relationship, and you end up with somebody who is difficult, abusive, whatever the case may be. Not such an easy thing to get out. You end up in a 9 and 0 relationship, and all of those friends that you seem to have had in your life, who are a part of your social dynamic, suddenly disappear. Because you're caught in a 9 and 0. These are mechanisms. And you see, you can't do anything about it. You can't be a 9 and 0, and the whole theme of your relationship is let's make room for somebody else, because it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It's just a mechanical thing. So you see, if you're not meant for that, if you get drawn into a relationship through the conditioning, through the way in which homogenized relationships work, and you end up in a relationship that you discover very quickly isn't necessarily for you, this is very difficult. It's very difficult. Not only that, you often end up with partners that can be deeply disturbed by having the relationship come to an end. It is something to recognize. And you see, to be helpless in one of these relationships, this is a very painful thing. It is. And that you can see it has a capacity for really altering the way in which that couple is going to operate. And it doesn't just have to be a couple. It can be those beings that are friends and everybody else can't get in. It can be those working associates that, really bond deeply to each other, and trade off their own, stuff together. There's all these levels that it works at. But you see, the only answer is not, oh, I'm in a 9-0 and I don't like it. Or I'm in a 9-0 and I've lost all of my good friends. And what can I do? That is not what this is about. It's a mechanical thing. There are beings that are supposed to be in 9-0 relationships that are absolutely perfect for them. Because that's where they're supposed to be. That's what's really correct for them in terms of the way in which, they're designed to connect to the other. And remember, it doesn't mean that if you connect with your partner or friend and it's a 9-0 that you're going to be a 9-0 with everybody else. It doesn't work that way. You begin to see when you start looking at your design and you look at the design of people in your life, you begin to see very quickly that there are all these different formulas that emerge out of these relationships, and they change the way it works. If you've got a 9-0 relationship with a friend, no sense inviting somebody else to join you to go out. It's not the kind of thing that is going to work. It just isn't. It's like trying to break up the friendship of one of your kids with somebody because you don't particularly like them or whatever the case may be, and they're a 9-0. You watch and see what kind of a dilemma that's going to bring. So it's a mechanical thing to be aware of. Okay, at least this illustration is correct. All right, again, we have the same formula. We're bringing two beings together, and we're bringing them together, and all we're looking for, again, very simple, on the surface, but it tells you a great deal about the nature of the relationship. So here what you can see is the obvious. We have an 8 and 1, and you can see, all right, have some fun. Now, why have some fun? The thing to recognize about being a couple and you have an open center is that you've got something that the two of you can be open to together. You're going to be able to develop areas of common interest. And of course, those areas of common interest are something that binds you to the outside world together. So in this case, the two of you taking in the splenic phenomena of the world, and your own particular designs in relationship to that, because together you have an undefined spleen. But you see, the moment that you have this single window, you can think about it as a single window, a way of getting out of the relationship and into something else. Something that they can share from their different perspectives, not the 9-0 that you're locked in so deeply. But here, that place where, you can go out together, you can do things together, you can work together, you can discover things together. So the 8 and 1 is something that is, it is a very healthy kind of bond between two beings. Now, by the way, there's something to keep in mind. If you look at this particular design, you'll see that this is actually a very odd design. Because in fact, there's a triple split definition here, 3 different parts that are connected. That part here that's connected, this part here that's connected, and this part here that's connected, but the 3 parts aren't connected to each other. When you have a relationship like this that's built on splits, it's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult to maintain balance in the relationship because there are many disconnects. And that for a relationship like this, if it was just a couple, no children, that the only thing that you can actually recommend to them is find that thing that the two of you really love to do and find that thing out in the world, so that you can be a part of things together. That helps them in terms of bringing these parts of their design together so they have a more, a deeper sense of their connection to each other. But again, it's a mechanical thing. If the splits are there in the relationship, it means there's aspects of the way in which you connect to each other that do not connect to each other. And again, is going to represent certain dynamics for the relationship that are going to cause tensions. In the not-self world, it is one of the most common things. Relationships with splits, in which couples really don't feel connected to each other. And of course, it creates all kinds of problems because they don't understand why. They assume it's the fault of the other. It isn't. It's just mechanics. And the moment that you see the mechanics doesn't mean you fix anything. You don't fix anything. You surrender. There's nothing to fix. Nothing to fix in the sense that you can change the mechanic. You can't. You can change the way in which you live the experience of being in that relationship, or you can leave it. But there's no fixing, because there's nothing to fix. It simply is what it is. Seven and 2, work to do. Now, the work to do is that if you're a 7 and 2 relationship, and here you can see that this relationship is a single definition, so it's a fully integrated relationship. And if you look at this, you can see that there's 2 centers open. The moment you have 2 centers open, it means that the couples can end up having different interests that ultimately, send them apart from each other. So the moment that this is the kind of relationship in which there's a problem, one partner goes out this window and one partner goes out that window. In other words, these end up being the kind of partnerships in which the partners basically learn how to escape each other most of the time. And they escape each other most of the time with their particular interests. No, sorry, I've got to work, or sorry, I've got to do this thing, or, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. There's a window they go out of in order to, not get into this. The other side of that, by the way, again, it's very important to see that if I'm talking about the not self, every single one of these mechanics is a negative. At some level or another, it is going to bring out negatives because there's no understanding. And ultimately, without understanding in relationships, all you get is a power trip. And the power trip, however the power trip is played out, male, female roles, all that stuff, however it's played out, it's just that. It's a power trip, and it's cruel because there's nothing to change. Anybody who wants to change you is the enemy. This is not what existence is about. We are not here to be changed by somebody. We're here to be ourselves. We're not here to obey somebody else's demands because they have a specific need to mold our life in a certain way to satisfy themselves. Forget all that. All of that is real insanity. This is all power trip stuff. See, this is mechanics. It's mechanics. We are helpless in these mechanics. It's not like you can do anything about this, that this one's going to go here and that one's going to go there. But you see, if the bond between them is healthy and aware, this will be part of their relationship, that yes, they do have these separate interests, but the separate interests aren't separating them. Because it isn't an issue that one is over here and the other one is over there. It's not, you're over there to avoid me, or you're over there to be away from me. Because it isn't. It's just what this kind of relationship offers. You can see that the mechanics are very simple. It just gives you the basic formulas, the 9 and O's, the ones that really have to be totally locked in. So you have to see that has to be a fundamental dynamic in your design, that this is part of what your cognitive exploration is on this plane, to be so deeply connected to another human being, to take in that deep experience of the other. You can see that in the 8-1, you have something very different. What you have is the beginning of this kind of generational interest field, this window open for couples to go out into the world, to join others, to do things, all of that stuff, to be involved with each other at that level, to gain that appreciation of each other. And obviously there are very positive things in that. The same thing here. Yet you have to see that at the not self level, These dynamics, they create all the dilemmas that are there. It's the foundation of them. These are not beings that entered into a relationship correctly. They find themselves in a 7 and 2. They may not be built for that. You know, just because they end up in it doesn't mean it was meant for them. They didn't enter into it correctly. And they may end up with somebody who's really into that. You know, and the relationship is going to be problematic. Happy Valentine's Day. Never mind. My sense of humor. 6 and 3. 6 and 3 is always fascinating. You know, you can see 6 and 3, better to be free. For some people, this is a classic. You know, if it really is in your nature to be, you know, not really connected in a relationship, but still in a good relationship, which is quite a thing to think about. You know, the kind of thing that, you know, hippie propaganda was about in 40, 50 years ago, whatever that was. But 6 and 3 is an interesting thing. For the not-self, it's a disaster. I mean, for the not-self, it's always a problem. You know, this is, you know, there's so many ways to go, and, you know, there's so much distraction in the relationship that it's very difficult for these couples to pay much attention to each other. Then again, if it really is in your nature to have that kind of relationship where you can spend a great deal of time, you know, in your own thing, in your own space, and, you know, only connect every once in a while for, you know, the value of that connection, you know, this is something that can be, you know, perfect for you. In other words, you know, these are the basic mechanics for the kinds of connections that we have with each other. They're just basic. Again, remember something. See, human design says if you're going to live by your mind, you're going to have a homogenized life. You're going to be in all of these different mechanics.
What happened to my volume here?
Sorry about that, folks. It was a server disconnect for a moment. You have to get to the point where you grasp that the mind has been involved in trying to deal with things that it cannot in any way truly deal with. It can't. I mean, this is the blackest joke of all, is that the mind is not able to change any of this. It can't. It can't. All it does is, create the suffering, the pain, the anguish, the anger, the frustration, the bitterness, the disappointment, all of those things. And what we end up with is a catalog of beings who the biggest pain in their existence is having to deal with relationships. And this is not what we're here for. It isn't. I mean, nine-centered beings are here to be cognitive. We're here to commune. We're here to share our outer authority. We're here to share our intelligence with each other. We're here to be deeply respectful of the other human being because we accept them for what they are. Whatever this thing is, whatever this thing is. You can't do anything about that. You cannot change that. You cannot change them. You cannot make them into something different. They connect to you the way they do. And the results are what they are. And you either sit back in the passenger seat in awareness and watch the movie, your movie, you the star, and see what it is to be here on this plane as you. Because you see, if you trust in your strategy and authority, if you take away the decision-making process from your mind, you get to enter into things the way you were intended to. You get to meet those beings that you're intended to meet in the combinations that are absolutely correct for you. Because this is what we're here for. You know, think about it. The mind, in trying to control the life and organize the life, becomes a liar automatically. It's what mind does best. It lies. It lies to protect itself. It cannot fully tell any truth because it holds back this or that, or doesn't say something. It can never truly communicate with the other. It can never really be free of that barrier that stands back behind it and says, we better be careful what we say here because you cannot trust the mind to run your life. All you do is allow the mind to become the greatest distortion. Okay, so I've shown you one set of formulas. Now I'm going to show you another. And it is one that takes you a step deeper into the way in which we bind with the other. And this is the way in which we connect in the channels themselves, specifically. Not looking at the surface and looking at the centers, but simply, looking directly at the way we connect with another human being in a channel. So here is what's called electromagnetic. Now, electromagnetic is when, you have a gate in one end of the channel and the other person has the gate at the other end of the channel. In other words, you both are missing that aspect. And because we're built on receptors, that's something, this 59 is always interested in 6s, and this 6 is always interested in 59s. There's a hook. And when the two of them meet and step into each other's aura, what happens is that we get an electromagnetic definition. That is, we get a wiring between these two centers. Now, electromagnetic is an interesting thing. It is attraction and repulsion. It's both. We live in a dualistic construct in the yin and the yang, the DNA and the RNA. The electromagnetic is the attraction that pulls you to somebody. You go, oh, you step into that aura and it's like, oh, that's what I want. That's what I want. I want that at the other end. I want that. And the other one at the other end is going, oh, I want that at the other end. There's this, ooh. And then they come together. And within an hour, a week, a month, at some point, that thing that they have over there that you thought was so great, Jesus, it's a pain. It's like, oof. Attraction and repulsion. And it never stays one or the other. It fluctuates back and forth. That thing that you thought was so sexy or so terrific, all of a sudden is not, And you see, you have to understand the joke. The joke is that you've got hard wiring over here, and there's 1,069 possibilities that are at the other end. I mean, that's a lot of variety. And even though this was, at the beginning, there's also this variety that's out there that this example is not the definitive example of. So the electromagnetic connection, very strong. Very strong. It can be very, very powerful in a relationship. This attraction field, repulsion field. You love to hate them. You hate to love them. All of that stuff is rooted in the electromagnetic. Okay. Next up. Oh, compromise. compromise is nasty. I mean, compromise is a burr in your side. It's a thorn in your foot. Do I need to give you any more examples? Think about what this is really like. You know, here's Miss Wonderful over here. And she has the definition here in this channel. And here's Mr. Wonderful over here. And Mr. Wonderful has part of this channel. And the two of them get together and you get this, compromise. You can see that there is still this whole channel that is being controlled by this, and there's this 12 that's interspersed in here. Now, no matter how much this 12 would like to control anything in this channel, it cannot. It cannot. Because the control mechanism is here. For example, the 22nd gate is the gate of the left ear. It's a gate of listening. And it's often about listening to music or poetry, or, you know, it has romantic tendencies to it. So it's about listening. So here's this couple. And 12 over here says, I want to listen to blah, blah, blah. And 12 over here says, I'm going to listen to whatever the hell I want to listen to. Now, it doesn't necessarily say it that way, sorry, you know. But the fact is that no matter how the argument will go, because in compromise always leads to arguments. Not only that, in this case, if you had somebody who was unemotional and she's emotional, the moment he would want to listen to something that she doesn't want to listen to, he would get the emotional wave. At which point he would say, yes, dear, whatever you like. And it's a mechanic. You got to get this, you see. It's just a mechanism. It's not like it's her fault, because truly it is not her fault. It has nothing to do with fault or blame. You cannot fault her ancestors, fault her whole genetic history, because this is just what she is. She has the whole channel. And you can't blame him. He doesn't know any better. It seems like every time he wants to go down that road, somebody is controlling how he gets to the end of it. And it begins to chew at him. This is compromise. And compromise is something that, you know, so many relationships have a compromise in their, you know, in the construct. Sometimes several in the construct. And you know, I mean, there was a time in my career where I did a lot of readings, and I did a lot of partnership readings. And, you know, you get to the place of the compromise, and you could see the old battle scars, you know. And, you know, I'd say, well, you know, she always did this. And he'd go, yeah, right, you know. And I'd say, yeah, but it's not her fault. You're actually in a relationship here to listen to what she wants to listen to. You want to listen to something by yourself, then go off by yourself and listen to something. But if you want to be in this relationship, you're going to have to accept the fact that you're going to have to listen to what she wants to listen to. And if you don't like that, well, you know what the alternatives are. See, relationships are extraordinary things when you get to that place where you can just let go and accept somebody's design. I've lived with compromise in a relationship for over 2 decades. It is, for the mind, one of those incredible annoying things. And it never stops being annoying to the mind. Because the mind enjoys digging into those things and trying to use them as mechanisms to take control. I understand the helplessness of the other. It mirrors mine. All I can do is, embrace what's there with awareness, what I find in the compromise process in my life is that I've gone from the annoyance and at times anger, I'm a manifester, to the humor stage where it just got to be funny. And finally to the point now where it's just a thing. I mean, it's just a thing. I'm just aware of it. It's just there. And I stay away from the territory that draws it out, because there's no point in indulging in a mechanism that you can never win, unless you're a masochist and, you're designed to suffer in that way. Then please, by all means, enter correctly into a relationship that's full of compromise, and you'll really get to see what that's like. You see, these are just things. It's not about the person. I mean, it isn't. It's not about the essence of who they are. You see, our relationships, these things that happen to us when we connect to the other, that thing that becomes the two of us, it is not something, that you can do anything with other than experience. It's what we're here for. We're here to experience this process cognitively. We're not here to be caught in the survival, mental distortion movie. It's not. This is one of my favorites. This is dominance. You can see the obvious of dominance. Somebody has the whole channel and the other person doesn't have any. So obviously this person here is taking in the whole experience of, having these centers defined in this way and amplifying that. But dominance is a really interesting thing in a relationship. Earlier when I was showing you, the center formulas, the 9 and 0 and the 8 and 1, when you look at them, at that level, when they come together, and they come together in the connection chart, there's this thing there, and that thing takes on a life of its own. It's what you become as a couple, as friends, as, whatever the case may be, whatever label you put on the relationship. It is that, that thing that you become, and you begin to see each other within that framework. Particularly, for example, the 9 and 0 is very locked into each other, see each other, through that connection. Now, think about what it is not to have dominance in your relationship. For example, that you don't have a dominance, in relationship to your partner has a dominance in relationship to you. If you don't have that, neither one of you really know what each other is like away from each other. You don't. I mean, if you have a partner who has the channel of struggle, 2838, and that channel of struggle is dominance for you, because you don't have any of that. And if you meet somebody, a mutual friend, and they say to you, I just saw your friend, your partner, your lover, I just saw them, trying to find their keys. They lost their keys and they're stuck and they can't get their car going. And I would say, oh yeah, that's them. Because the moment that you have dominance from someone else, you really learn a great deal about whatever that thing is. And it becomes something that you identify very easily with that person, and identify with them in the sense that you have a sense of them beyond the relationship. Most couples don't have a sense of their partners beyond the relationship. I mean, think about that. It's really funny when you think about it, but they don't. The only understanding that they have is the way they connect to that partner. And of course, given that they're not self and they're all lost in that, they have very, very little understanding of each other as beings. Why do you think so many relationships get to that point where one of the partners is in a stage of, this just doesn't work? They just get there. And finally, we have companionship. I have a wonderful companionship story for you. Seems like aeons ago. I think it was about 20 years ago. I was in, not quite, it was in 1994. And I was teaching, I was giving a training, an analyst training, here in Ibiza, where I live. And I had 3 students, and two of them, there were 2 of them that knew the third person, but those 2 never knew each other. Yet as I got to, meet them and got to go through their designs, the first thing that I noticed was that these 2 women, they had the same basic design. That is, at the surface level, they had the same birthday. They were born about 6 hours apart. There were certain minor things that were different on the surface. But basically, they were quite similar in the way in which they were made up. The other thing is that they had both been sannyasins with Osho, and they had both been to India at the same time, and they had both been at that ashram at the same time, never met each other. Anyway, so there was all these coincidences, and there they were, the 2 of them in this class on either side of the person they knew mutually. And this was a classic example of companionship in the extreme. It is something that is really interesting about what happens with companionship. You go to a gathering, the friends are gathering, or there's an event that's taking place, or whatever the case may be. And you go in there. Now, those beings in there who have a similar design to you, they are not going to be of interest to you. And why aren't they going to be of interest to you? Because genetically, they don't make sense. The genes don't like companionship. The genes don't like sameness. They don't. So the genes do everything in their power to move us away from sameness, which, by the way, can be deeply, deeply comforting and relaxing. Move us away from sameness and only gear us towards what we're not. Only gear us towards all of that attraction out there for our receptors. So companionship is something that's quite different, and you don't see necessarily, at least my experience, is that you don't see a lot of companionship in relationships. But when it's there, what you're looking at, and of course is very simple, you both have the same channel, is that you have something that you have deeply in common. I mean, deeply in common in your wiring. That is something that can be, the safe place in a storm for the 2 of you in your relationship. I mean, that is what companionship brings. It brings, it's like that comfortable sofa. It brings all of, the possibilities of feeling secure and not being surprised by things and, having things be fundamentally stable. All of this is something that's a byproduct of companionship. The other side of companionship is boredom, because it's the other part of it. That is, no matter how stable companionship, the stability companionship brings to a relationship, it still presents dilemmas in terms of it's not stimulating. It's just not. And again, this is a mechanical thing. It's about understanding that if you're going to be in a relationship that has strong companionship, that you have to expect that it's not going to be an incredibly stimulating relationship. But then again, that's not what it's for. I mean, that's not what it's for. And remember, relationships are built on combinations of these things. A little bit of this and a little bit of that. A compromise here, a companionship there, some dominance over there. There are all these combinations that are going to arise in your bonds with the other. So what do you do with it? Because, of course, this is really what it's all about, after all. I mean, you can sit down and you can go through this material again, and you can understand all of these basic mechanical concepts. You can recognize them because, again, human design is not a belief system. It's about taking charts you have and charts of people that you know, and look for yourself, because you will discover so much about, what is there in those bonds, just from the simplest level. To be able to see the kinds of mechanisms that are there. so that you can let go. So you can let go. See, I'm not somebody that really enjoys being in the repair job. You know, that job of providing, solutions for problems in mechanisms, because it's a terrible thing to try to do that, because without awareness, there's not much you can do. And you see, in order to really have relationships that are correct for you, you've got to enter into them correctly, or confirm that they are correct for you in a way that is according to your strategy and authority. Otherwise, there's no point in putting your energy into dysfunctional relationships. There isn't. I mean, yes, I understand the world, and I understand all of these different kinds of bonds and the traps that they bring. I know the responsibilities, the sentimentalities, all of the various things that add up to the complexity of not-self relationships and how they manage to survive with all their discomfort. But you see, as I said from the very beginning, I am not here to teach about relationships. That's not what human design is for. It's very valuable as a tool to understand them. There is no question about that. And it's obviously part of the knowledge base that's developed out of human design. Because whenever we can be aware about our bonds, our connections to the other, this empowers our awareness. But you have to realize this is about you making the right decisions in your life. Not you trying to fix things that cannot be fixed. It's about you making the right decisions in your life. This is what it's about. This is the great experiment of human design. This is what makes this thing different, is that it works, and you can find that out for yourself. And when you look at relationship, don't get caught up in the Maya fantasy personality business. Hold off for a second. Strip it down to just its mechanics and see something. If you were truly here to be in a relationship, then be in the relationship. Allow it to be what it is. Be its witness as much as you are a part of it. Because there is nothing to fix or change. There is only the experience of connecting in a certain way to the other. You see, if you enter into that correctly, that's a really enriching experience. It's profound. And then we get to see the beauty in the other, because we're not trying to make the other something that the other is not. That we are not refusing to see who's there. That we're always struggling, for our control. See, forever, the seven-centered being dreamed of being surrendered. For us, it is something that's natural. It's strategy and authority. This is what surrender is. It is the mind surrendering control over your life. That's what it is. And the moment that you let go of your mind running your life, it doesn't matter what any of these things are. It doesn't matter if you connect this way or that way or the other way. You live as yourself. You enter into the relationship as yourself, and you experience it as yourself. Then you're there. No matter what the relationship is. You see, we have to get to that place where we accept that life is blameless. No fault, no victims, no dependencies. Just simply being correct as oneself. I teach self-love. That's my Valentine's Day message. And when you can love yourself, which means that you accept your design, and the way it functions in the world, then you're ready to love anyone and anything. You can just let them be. And when you're correct, you get the correct experience for your process. You do. So yes, you can look at all these mechanisms. Remember that human design is a vast, deep science now. There's a tremendous amount of knowledge in this. But this is not the point of human design. It is what's there to substantiate it now and into the future. The point is living it. Live it. Live the experiment. And you see, as you live the experiment, you will begin to discern. It is this discernment that's everything. Because you can see these mechanisms, you can understand that every relationship is a constraint. And it either is a constraint that you embrace and surrender to, or you're going to be uncomfortable, like most people, in the complexities of their relationships as not self. Well, I hope that you enjoyed all that is of value to you. It's my Valentine's Day gift. Human design's a gift. It was a gift to me, great treasure. It is an extraordinary thing for human beings that are ready. It isn't for everyone. It will never be for everyone. It's for those that are ready. And that readiness is a serendipity. It's a door opening slightly. It's that moment of the possibility of being able truly to go a different way. It's time to go a different way. It's time to go the way of ourselves, what we are as beings, nine-centered beings. That we are here to be efficient survivors, deeply cognitive and aware, and capable of a deep communion with our fellows. It's what it's all about. And all of this comes from within each of you, each of us, one by one, individually. To live the beauty of your strategy and authority is to differentiate, is to go to that place where nobody else can go. To follow the journey that is truly your journey, your path, your way. To be the passenger of the truths that are discovered along that way and the communion that follows. We're here to have special lives. We're here to be masters in the Maya, not pawns. We're here to navigate with ease, to sail these neutrino seas, and to sail them in delight, in wonder. You see, I love being here on this plane, in this form, now. Wow. Such a place to be. When all the secrets are laid open at your feet and all you have to do is be ready. There has never been a time like this. There has never been a knowledge like this, ever. And you see, all it takes is the readiness to take that journey, to disconnect from the madness of the not-self world and its not-self purposes, to rediscover the dignity of what it is to be you. It's a wonderful thing to love yourself. It truly is magic. I wish it for all of you on this Valentine's Day. Anyway, thanks for being here. Nice for me to see you all. Pleasure to share this with you. I wish you all well. You take care. Bye for now.